There's a kind of power that doesn't need loud words, arguments, or explanations, a power that speaks in silence, in presence, and in action. When a woman disrespects you, most men think the solution is confrontation or trying harder to prove their worth. But the truth is, the deepest regret doesn't come from what you say, it comes from what you withhold. In this video, we will uncover the 5 silent moves that make women regret ever disrespecting you, not through anger or ego, but through undeniable strength and self-respect. There is one truth about human behavior that most people fail to realize. What you give freely without boundaries, others stop valuing. The moment you pour your energy, time, and constant availability into someone who disrespects you, you unconsciously train them to believe that no matter how they treat you, you will always remain. Attention is not just about talking or texting. It is about your presence, your energy, and the way you make someone feel significant. When you are too generous with that energy, it loses its weight. But the instant you pull it back, the world shifts. A woman who disrespected you suddenly begins to feel the silence echo, the absence of your presence creating a void that words cannot fill. This is why withdrawing attention is one of the most powerful silent moves, because it does not require confrontation, explanations, or arguments. It simply lets her experience the reality of losing something she had assumed would always be there. What most men do wrong in this situation is that they keep feeding the fire. They beg for clarity, they argue, they try to prove their worth, and they give more of the very attention that was already being taken for granted. But this only fuels the disrespect further. Because when someone sees that no matter how poorly they treat you, you will still be there, they stop associating you with strength and start associating you with desperation. That is the dangerous position many men fall into without even realizing it. But when you shift, when you pull back completely, this creates a silent contrast she cannot ignore. While she is replaying moments of disrespect in her mind, you are living proof that no disrespect has the power to break you. And it is this quiet dignity, this silent withdrawal, that makes her feel the weight of what she dismissed. Because nothing creates regret like the realization that someone you once thought would always be available is now completely untouchable. One of the strongest forms of power a man can ever hold is emotional control. It is not about never feeling emotions, but about choosing how, when, and where those emotions are expressed. When a woman disrespects you, the natural instinct most men have is to react. They raise their voice, they argue, they try to prove a point, or they shut down with bitterness. This reaction, however, only reveals one thing, that her words or actions have the power to shake your foundation. The more emotional you become in response to her disrespect, the more control she feels she has over you. But when you remain calm, when you keep your composure in the face of provocation, something far deeper happens. Silence combined with emotional stability makes a woman question why her behavior has no effect on you. That lack of reaction begins to echo in her mind, and instead of controlling the situation, she starts to feel the weight of her own actions. The truth is that emotional control is a sign of maturity and strength that few people ever master. It is not about pretending you don't care. It is about refusing to hand over your inner power to someone else. When you react with anger, desperation, or defensiveness, you show that she holds the strings to your emotions. But when you remain unshaken, you send a different message entirely. You silently communicate that your value is not up for debate, that your sense of self is not defined by how someone treats you in the moment, And this is where the regret begins to grow because she expects your outburst. She anticipates your reaction. She assumes you will crumble under the weight of her words. Instead, she is faced with stillness, and in that stillness lies an authority she cannot ignore. Think about it. People often test boundaries not to destroy them, but to see how firm they are. A woman may push, provoke, or even disrespect you, not because she always means harm, but because she wants to see how much you can handle before you lose yourself. If you lose control easily, it tells her that your emotions can be manipulated. But if you remain calm, if you respond with nothing but composure, you silently prove that you cannot be shaken. That realization begins to gnaw at her because suddenly she understands that the games, the words, the disrespect, none of it has the power to disturb your peace. And nothing creates regret more quickly than realizing that her actions could not move you, but they could cost her you. What emotional control also does is shift the focus back to her. Instead of your explosion taking center stage, her behavior is left standing alone in silence. Without your reaction to distract from it, she has no choice but to face the reality of what she did. That is when reflection begins. She notices that instead of engaging in battles, you simply stepped back with calmness. She feels the void where an argument should have been, and that void speaks louder than any words could. The more you practice control, the more powerful your silence becomes. She learns that your emotions are not toys to be played with, and that lesson leaves a mark. Because true regret is not born from what you tell her, it is born from the weight of her realizing that her actions had no control over you, but they might have cost her the presence of someone unshakable. There is nothing more powerful, nothing more transformative than shifting your energy from chasing someone's validation to building yourself into the kind of man who commands respect without ever asking for it. Self-improvement is not just about working on your body or your bank account. It is about evolving into a version of yourself that no longer needs to beg for recognition. When a woman disrespects you, the silent move that speaks the loudest is not retaliation or argument. It is redirection. Instead of pouring time and energy into trying to fix her perception of you, you invest that same energy into refining who you are. You begin to focus on your physical strength, your financial stability, your personal goals, your spiritual growth. And while she may expect you to remain stuck, consumed by her actions, she slowly begins to realize that her disrespect only became the fuel for your rise. Most men fall into the trap of trying to convince a woman of their value with words. They plead, they explain, they try to highlight what they bring to the table. But the problem is, words lose their power when they come from someone who is not actively living them. When you tell someone you are valuable but you are stagnant in life, those words carry little weight. But when you stop explaining and start evolving, the results speak for themselves. There is no louder statement than your silent growth. Every time you choose to go to the gym instead of chasing her text, every time you invest in your future instead of wasting time on someone who doesn't respect you, every time you push yourself to achieve something new, you silently shift the balance of power. Because nothing makes someone regret losing you more than watching you become the version of yourself they once doubted. The psychology behind this is deeply rooted in human nature. People are attracted to progress, to growth, to someone who is moving forward with purpose. When you stagnate, you lose not only respect, but also attraction. But when you rise, when you become sharper, more disciplined, more focused, you naturally command admiration. The woman who disrespected you begins to see what she no longer has access to. She begins to realize that while she wasted her energy dismissing you, you use that same energy to elevate yourself into someone she now wishes she had valued. And this is not because you are trying to prove anything to her, but because your silence was spent investing in something no one can take away from you, yourself. Self improvement is also a form of revenge that carries no bitterness. You are not plotting against her. You are not trying to make her jealous. You are simply becoming better. And in that process, the tables turn naturally. The man she thought would remain the same is no longer recognizable, and the life she thought you would never build is now unfolding right in front of her eyes. The regret comes not because you tried to make her feel it, but because she sees that the door to your life is no longer open the way it once was. She sees that in the silence of your withdrawal, you created a new reality where her disrespect became irrelevant because you transformed into someone who no longer depends on her recognition to know his worth. One of the most silent yet undeniable forms of power is social value. It is the reflection of how the world perceives you, the respect you command without ever having to demand it. When a woman disrespects you, she often assumes that her perception of you defines your reality. She believes that her words or actions hold weight because, in her mind, you need her approval to feel validated. But when you begin to build and elevate your social value, that illusion is shattered. Social value is not about being flashy or loud. It is about quietly positioning yourself in a way that others admire, respect, and look up to. It is about building a life where your name carries weight, where your presence is valued, and where your absence is noticed by many. And the beauty of this silent move is that it does not require a single word to be spoken to her. She simply sees it, feels it, and begins to regret ever underestimating you. The mistake many men make after being disrespected is that they shrink. They isolate themselves, withdraw from the world, and live in the shadow of that rejection. But isolation is not strength. True power is shown when you channel that energy into expanding your world, not narrowing it. You begin to cultivate stronger friendships, meaningful connections, and networks that uplift you. You start to be seen in places of growth, around people of influence, and within environments where your presence carries significance. While she may have thought her disrespect defined your worth, your rising social value tells a completely different story. It silently communicates that her If she crosses the line, you do not shout, you do not chase, you simply step back and withhold your energy. That absence becomes the loudest response she could ever receive. It is in that absence that she begins to feel the weight of her actions because the access she once had is no longer available. That access is what most people take for granted, and when it is silently removed, regret begins to grow. The psychology of silence is deeply powerful because human beings are conditioned to expect reactions. When someone disrespects you, they anticipate your anger, your emotional outburst, or your desperate attempts to fix the situation. But when none of that comes, when you remain still and unwavering, it creates discomfort in the other person's mind. She begins to wonder why her words no longer have power, why her actions no longer affect you, and why your silence feels heavier than any argument could. That confusion slowly transforms into reflection, and in that reflection, regret takes root, because silence forces her to sit with her own behavior instead of being distracted by your response. Boundaries backed by silence also protect your dignity. They ensure that you do not lower yourself into situations where your energy is wasted on proving your value to someone who has already chosen to dismiss it. Instead of pleading for respect, you show through your actions that you will walk away from anything that does not align with your standards. And when she sees that her disrespect does not make you cling harder, but instead pushes you to retreat into silence, the dynamic shifts completely. She realizes that you are not like most men, that you do not reward bad behavior with more of your energy. That realization alone is enough to create regret because it shows her that your presence in her life was a privilege, not a guarantee. What makes silence and boundaries so powerful together is that they do not require you to prove, argue, or justify yourself. They stand on their own as a reflection of self-respect. When you are silent, you refuse to engage in chaos. And when you set boundaries, you refuse to accept less than what you deserve. This combination becomes unshakable. Over time, she begins to see that your silence is not weakness, it is strength. She begins to understand that your boundaries are not walls to keep people out, but standards to ensure that only those who truly respect you can remain close. And in that understanding, she realizes that her disrespect did not just cost her your words, it cost her your presence, your energy, and your trust, all without you ever raising your voice. One of the most powerful lessons a man can ever learn is that his happiness and success are not dependent on anyone else, and this becomes a silent form of influence that no words can match. When a woman disrespects you, the instinctive reaction is often to try harder, to plead for attention, or to fight for her approval. But true power lies in doing the opposite, thriving without her. Thriving without her is not about proving anything to her. It is about reclaiming your life, your energy, and your focus. It is about living a life so full, so complete, and so driven by your own purpose that her presence or lack of it becomes irrelevant. When you reach this state, the regret she feels is not manufactured. It is a natural consequence of seeing someone she underestimated rise above her expectations while remaining untouched by her disrespect. Thriving without her begins with mindset. It is the understanding that your value is inherent and cannot be diminished by someone else's actions. Most men allow disrespect to define their reality. They let it affect their mood, their confidence, and even their sense of self-worth. But when you thrive independently, you show a level of self-mastery that is impossible to ignore. You invest your energy into meaningful goals, into passions that elevate your life, and into relationships that nurture rather than drain you. Every achievement, every small victory becomes a silent testament to your resilience. You no longer exist in reaction to her behavior. Instead, you create a life that is magnetic, abundant, and unshakable. The physical, mental, and emotional changes that come from thriving without her are equally powerful. You become fitter, sharper, more confident, and more charismatic, not for her attention, but because your life demands it. You surround yourself with people who respect and admire you, and your social circle becomes a reflection of the life you are building. In this space, her disrespect loses all relevance. She begins to notice the shift, the difference between the man she once dismissed and the man who now moves through life with purpose, clarity, and an unwavering sense of self. And in that noticing, regret begins to grow quietly, but inevitably, because she understands that she is no longer part of the life she once took for granted. Thriving without her also communicates an unspoken message that no confrontation ever could. It shows that your world does not revolve around her whims, that your happiness does not depend on her approval, and that your energy is too valuable to waste on someone who cannot respect it. The more you excel in every area of your life, the more undeniable this truth becomes. While she may try to draw your attention or provoke a reaction, nothing penetrates your focus or distracts you from your path. This kind of silent authority is magnetic because it contrasts